If folks will take their seats, we're going to continue with other agenda items for the open session. Rudy?
Thank you, Eric. So most of this afternoon will be given over to review, discussion, and voting on 6 concepts that we're going to bring to the council. The first 3 are PARs, program announcements with special review criteria, and the second set of 3 are RFAs with a set aside of funds. So we're going to begin with Chris Wellington, Program Director from the Division of Genomic Sciences, who's going to present the renewal of the Genomic Community Resource PAR. Chris?
Thank you, Rudy. Okay, so I'm going to be presenting to reissue this longstanding PAR that supports genomic community resources for biomedical and clinical research. So we think this is a highly successful PAR. It's been around for various iterations for some time, and so we'll be asking your approval to reissue it without major changes. I'm going to go through this in 2 parts. First, use a few examples of some of our funded projects to try to explore the scope of this PAR, and then second, talk about some specifics of the reissuance and the special review criteria. After that, we'll open the floor for discussion, and Rudy will ask for a vote when you are ready. Okay, so starting looking at the scope of this PAR, some of the most visible projects supported under it are databases, informatics resources. We have the mods such as Wormbase, more clinical resources like OMIM and ClinGen, and platforms like Galaxy and Bioconductor. The PAR also supports the comprehensive collection of genomic features. This example of this could be the GenCode project of human and mouse gene annotations that are used by many researchers and consortia. And under limited conditions, this PAR can also support the generation of standard data types on central sets of samples. Example of this is the Human Genome Structural Variation Consortium, collecting structural variant information on the 1,000 genomes samples. So this is not an exhaustive list, but it gives some idea, hopefully, of the scope. Over the past couple years, the number of projects supported under this PAR has remained relatively constant, around 30 projects at any given time, and about $60 million per year. So now I'm just going to go through some of the specifics of the reissuance. As is common for PARs, our plan is to reissue it for 3 years, 3 standard receipt dates, and to continue using the U24 activity code. The special review criteria are in many ways what sets this apart, so take a minute here to go through a few of them. So first off, in this PAR, we define innovation very broadly. We recognize that what looks like innovation in an R01 will be very different from what looks like innovation in a model organism database, for instance. And so the review criteria guide the reviewers to consider that and look for appropriate innovation where it fits with the project. So it could be things like designing a system to accept new data types when they come about, or plans to accelerate human curation efforts. The review criteria also calls for a needs assessment and ongoing community outreach, recognizing that, again, that's critical for this to be a community resource. Sustainability is important. So from the outset, these projects need a credible plan for resource maintenance. Again, that is a review criteria. Hopefully this is not a surprise at this point, but these projects are expected to make their data fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And there is to be a service and training aspect, again, just the focus on community outreach, community engagement, and getting these used by the research community. So with that, we think this is a very important PAR, and we are asking to reissue it without major changes from how it is now. And so I will open the floor for any discussion or comments. Trey.
Yeah, so first of all, I think this is a great mechanism. It's probably not a surprise that I think that, but I just wanted to absolutely, second the express my enthusiasm for this renewal. And I have a generic comment that may or may not apply to your process, but I've seen it rear its head in a number of other NIH grant opportunities like this one and other institutes, for instance, both on the reviewer side and on the grantee side. And it has to do with the special review criteria. So if I'm not mistaken, but again, it may not apply to yours, but generically it seems like the NIH has these templates that are always at play and can confuse reviewers and everyone involved. So, for instance, there is still, I'm guessing, a specific aims page. There are still instructions to reviewers that you can't delete, that are there, and you probably can add some, but you can't take away the usual review criteria that appear at the bottom of the RFA. Am I right about that? Anyway,
Yes.
I would just have a look at that because in a couple of other RFAs like this that I've seen in the past year, it really there's conflicting messages sent to both the applicants and the review panels. For instance, you really want to write, these are the review criteria, these are the aims or the structure of the grant. But you can certainly see how people are confused and think they're looking for hypothesis-driven specific aims for these things, or they really, become confused about how they emphasize innovation, approach, significance, all of those things that I think are always boilerplate at the bottom of the RFA. Anyway, I think the point's been made. Just be very careful about, it'd be great if you could just rewrite the whole thing and not deal with that template. But if that's not a possibility, really think about how you can send the right message to reviewers and authors.
Thank you. Do you want to talk about the review since you?
Yeah, so I know historically, different ICs have used different activity codes for a resource like this. I've seen some of them are actually come in under the R01 activity code, which is kind of unusual because it's not really research. It's a different charge to the applicants. So the advantage of using the U24, because it's a cooperative agreement, our review branch will handle the review. We can highlight the sections of the review criteria that Chris has done in his presentation and really focus the review panel members on those aspects of the review. So I think we can avoid what has been problems in other settings.
On the review side, I think we have a good track record of that, of very successful reviews, but that is still a good point for applicants to be aware of. Thank you.
Sharon.
Yes, sir.
One comment and one question. So my understanding is the U24 is more straightforward than the U41 and doesn't have this multiple component? Good,
Yes.
okay. Because that multiple component thing creates a huge amount of work.
Yes.
Okay.
We appreciate that was
Okay,
very
great.
helpful.
And I apologize if I was dealing with something briefly. You said it. So this RFA is both NHGRI and NCI?
So
Are they voted on separately? I mean, the language you gave us to read
yes.
has both listed, so I'm just trying to understand how that works.
So this past PAR, NCI did sign on. That does not affect any of our funding decisions or anything. They are able to put their own language in.
Okay.
To say NCI is interested in X, Y, and Z. They may choose to do that again if it gets approved by their channels.
So we are each kind of independently voting on ours.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Raphael.
So my experience developing software is that it's very, very difficult to predict what users are going to want and what's going to be useful. So I want to hear a little bit more about what you mean by needs assessment and ongoing community outreach. Are the current tools being tested and people outside the project at all, for example?
So there's not a single standard needs assessment that we call for all projects, recognizing that there are very different types of things supported under this PAR. But it calls for the reviewers to evaluate whether the application has made the case well enough. that this really is a community resource and not just for the group developing it. And so the way it's written now, it calls the reviewers to really evaluate whether that case was made, and it strongly suggests needs assessment as the way to do that.
You're going to take adoption into user adoption into consideration to some degree.
That is part of the review criteria.
Although in truth, that can't be done before the resource is out there. That would come later, would it not? Adoption. It's up to the applicants to demonstrate, we're willing to create this resource. We know there is a compelling need from a large number of investigators for this resource.
That's what I would want to see in their proposal, is how they're going to know that that it's actually being useful to their users going forward.
They'll have to follow that up, and that will show up in their renewal application. Yeah.
It is a hard problem, though.
Other questions? Okay, can I get a motion to approve the concept as proposed? A second? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris.